everyone, welcome back to Underreported Stories, where we cover the news that CNN, MSNBC, and Fox News fail to report on or don't report on enough. And today I'm joined by political commentator Sabrina Kosmas. I'm not going to say your last name wrong. Welcome to the show, Sabrina.
Thanks so much for having me, Chrissy. I'm so excited to be here.
Yeah, of course. So we got to connect on Lara Trump's show, and now we're going to bring that conversation over here, pretty much standard style, similar to what Lara does, where we're just going to run through a ton of different stories. So I want to start off with this kind of crazy push. I find it to be a little crazy, or just not necessarily crazy, but like really out of the blue. This push being led by Ben Shapiro to pardon Derek Chauvin, who is the former Minnesota police officer convicted of killing George Floyd. And I went on this mission yesterday to find out what would happen if Ben Shapiro and, I think there's like 50,000 people who have signed a petition to kind of undo the federal case against George Floyd. What would happen if Trump actually decided to grant that pardon? And through my research, I found out that this would, of course, only impact the federal case where he pleaded guilty. And the state of Minnesota had sentenced him to like 22 and a half years, and the feds had sentenced him to 21 years. But he's serving those services. He's serving the sentences, at the same time. So if Trump pardoned Derek Chauvin, he's not getting out of jail. Like, nothing is going to change in terms of his jail time. So I'm super curious. What do you make of this movement? And through that information, what do you think the point of it is?
Yeah, and to be totally honest, I mean, of course, we all want to see justice served. It seems very clear at this point that, ultimately, the amount of narcotics that were in George Floyd's system contributed to his lack of being able to breathe. So, of course, we want to see justice served, but at the same time, it does not appear that this would exonerate Derek Chauvin altogether. If anything, I think it would move him to a state prison, which is actually more dangerous for him. So people are really advocating on his behalf for his justice and safety. This actually seems like not the best move. I'm very curious why this is so out of the blue, what the motive is behind it. It just seems so random. And I was kind of shocked to see this, especially I think it was announced the week that Ben Shapiro was at the Capitol for the address to Congress. And I wonder why this campaign is happening right now. I don't want to speculate too much, but it's a little out of the blue.
It is really random. And I think there's just a good conversation to be had about the way we utilize political capital. And right now, I was talking yesterday on Instagram Reels about really how the left is utilizing political capital on this whole illegal immigrant plane thing, where illegal immigrants gang members have been deported from the U.S. to El Salvador. And while on a plane, a judge ruled that the plane has to turn around. Of course, the Trump administration didn't comply with that for a litany of legal reasons I won't even get into. But the left is really utilizing a lot of political capital on gangs and thugs. And I'm just I understand what they think they're trying to do. I understand the nobility of advocating for due process rights, which is what the left is actually arguing for when you break it down. But why waste your political capital on something on gangbangers? For real, this is the argument, this is the hill we're gonna die on. And I kind of feel the same way about this Derek Chauvin case, where I'm seriously, this is the hill we want to die on? This has kind of been there, done that. We're not gonna change the man's life in any way, shape, or form. So I'm with you. I don't want to speculate too much, but at the same time, I'm he did plead guilty to these charges.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And you brought up a really good point about political capital. It's you only have so much time in the day to fight select fights. We're going to spend it on this. It seems really unusual. I mean, every time I see people, I don't know if you saw yesterday the video that the White House put out with their essentially taking the Tren de Agua gangs and all these gang members, and then they put Closing Time, the song, overlapping with it on Reels, which was absolutely hilarious. I mean, objectively, it's these are criminals. It's not like they're separating families right there and then adding a song to it. I can understand the lack of sensitivity for that, but these are violent criminals. It's good that we're busting them out. So it's funny because the band behind Closing Time, I don't know if you saw, they tweeted out how upset they were that their song was used for this. And it felt like Selena Gomez crying over illegals being deported all over again. It was just these celebrities are so out of touch and don't realize that this is something that across the political aisle people can get on the same page as. But yeah. Then they waste their social capital, their political capital on this.
Yeah, there's part of me that this isn't for me. Those videos are not for me. I voted for Trump. My audience knows I'm I'm conservative, and I'll just vote where I either don't vote or I vote for somebody that I think advocates for my policies. And so I voted for Trump this time around, but I'm not like this huge MAGA right way. Like, that's just not me. But so I see these videos and I'm like, yeah, I get what people are saying. Like, it's a little insensitive, but like, they do need to do things for their base at the same time. Like, I understand doing things for your base. The base of the left, though, and the base of the right are not like munching and just dying for gangbangers to be sent back around or Derek Chauvin's federal charges to be dropped. That's why I think this is so weird. I understand that the right-wing MAGA base is clamoring for these deportations. And so a video like that, while insensitive, is awesome. It's what the base wants.
Yeah, I totally agree. I mean, you gotta have some light fun with it. And we saw, how many ridiculous things did we see the Biden administration do on social media? I remember they sent that guy, gosh, what was his name, with the nails and his eccentric outfit to prance through the White House. Yes. So it's like, okay, we suffered through that for 4 years. You guys can laugh or just deal with like an occasional reel with a song on it.
Yeah, and you're going to live. You're going to live. Yeah. All right, well, we have a lot of good stories to get into, so let's pull up our docket for today, guys. So DOGE protests have been popping up all over the country, and we finally know why those are happening. Plus, there's a tragic story out of an Illinois middle school where staff members are forcing girls to change in front of boys, and we'll have Mama Sabrina here to break that all down. Plus, MSNBC is having mass layoffs, and it's really contingent on potentially these really bad op-eds. I don't know, might be one of the reasons for the bloodbath that's ensuing over there. We're going to get into all of those stories and more. So without further ado, let's get into the 5 underreported stories that you need to know. Today's show is brought to you by my merch line, Based. I'm an independent journalist, and the best way to support this show is by purchasing a hat, a hoodie, or the new Based Not Basic tote, or really any item from the apparel collection. Instead of asking you guys for donations to fund my independent journalism, my business partner and I created a line of merch called Based Apparel. Based means you're the opposite of woke. It means you're based in logic, you're based in truth. You get it. Head over to basedinlogic.com to check out our latest apparel. My personal favorite right now is the Based two-tone shirt. And remember, when you buy merch, you are directly supporting this show. Thank you, friends. Okay, so the mainstream media is covering these DOGE protests all over the country in Republican leading districts with pretty much the insinuation to their audience. And by the way, I watched these MSNBC clips. This is like, I'm saying insinuation for legal reasons. They're basically saying to their audience, these protests are grassroots protests by the people and for the people. And wrong. We know now that a left-wing George Soros-funded group called Indivisible has launched a reimbursement program to financially support any activist who goes out there and opposes Trump and Elon Musk's work. So the program reportedly offers up to $200 to cover expenses for signs, travel costs, and even the purchase of chicken suits. Sabrina, what do you make of these protests? And are you hearing anything about this? Like, aren't you in Texas? Is there any impact, any moving of the needle over in Texas about protests like this?
Yes, and actually, shout out to you because I had not seen a single news story on this until this morning when you sent me this article. So about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, you guys are good. You've got it nailed because about a week and a half, 2 weeks ago, I was on TikTok, and I actually live outside of Dallas, Texas, and Wiley, Texas is pretty close to where we live. And I got a TikTok about this mass, like, I would say protest. There was a lot of very clearly loud liberals with the local, one of our local state representatives just bombarding him at a city council or not a city council meeting, but a Q&A town hall that he was doing. And they were just berating him about Trump, about Elon, about DOGE. And it made no sense because he's our local state official. It's not like he's running DOGE. He's not even involved with DOGE by any means. And I thought this was so odd, especially because this area is incredibly conservative. Like, I go there all the time. I was like, this is not the demographic that is typically there. I could understand a couple of people, but to fill an entire auditorium to berate this local representative, I thought, this is phony and fake. Everything that the left seems to do is phony and fake. And now to find out that these people are being paid, it made complete sense. When I saw that article, I was like, this is what I was seeing. And we're seeing this pop up all over Texas. After I looked into the Wiley one, I started looking. There were some over on the other side of DFW that were popping up, and it just seemed so inauthentic. You can even see, too, the signs were all similar. The fact that they were like reimbursing for signs and markers is beyond silly. But it makes sense because these people are not going to take time out of their days, even if they aren't employed, to go yell at a city council person or a state representative that has nothing to do with DOGE or Elon, unless there is a financial incentive for them, or they can get, validate their day off work if they're getting paid for it. It is, it was so obvious. So when I saw the article, it just made my day this morning.
I know. I remember seeing those, and sometimes I get this instant regret that I saw that story. I can see the vision of it on my TV right here of that story. And I was just so curious as to A, how these people had all the time to do this. B, how so many people got rallied so quickly over something that 79% of people, they don't necessarily agree with DOGE, but they agree with what DOGE is supposed to do, right? Cutting and slashing and trying to advocate for a smaller government. That's actually very popular among Americans. So I remember seeing that and being like, what the hell? But now it makes so much sense. And also, I think we can't say this with 100% certainty, but also, let's be honest, this is rife for fraud, right? People are going to say they bought $200 worth of markers that day and just take money from George Soros's, $8 billion endowment that he's put into all of these different nonprofits. So I definitely see an opportunity for people to become full-time protesters almost. Not that $200 a day is much, but that's still an opportunity for people to go about that. Also, I do want to talk about... Oh, go ahead.
I was going to say, we also saw this with BLM. There was a lot of protesters and activists that were being funded by George Soros to go protest for BLM.
Yeah. But this is their whole strategy. I was reading, the details about it this morning, and this is their whole thing. They're going to do this until December. They're going to reimburse protesters for all of this. Does that tell you anything about the left's plan for the next year? Is that their whole get Trump pushback? Is they're just gonna have people go and do these DOGE protests? What does that insinuate or tell you about what's going on here?
It insinuates that the left thrives off chaos, and if there is not chaos, they will create it themselves. They will literally fabricate it themselves, and we're seeing that firsthand right now.
Yeah, you're so right. They are just going to keep creating things out of whole cloth, and that's what's so interesting about the media's role in all of this is I think they should have to disclose that these protests are funded by political groups, because what they're doing is they're just creating this almost cognitive dissonance among the American people that wait, is DOGE really that hated by the is Trump really that hated? It's they're trying to create this mental gymnastics that people have to do, go on defense when something that is really popular, that people feel is really popular, but the media is reporting it like it's not popular at all. It's weird, right?
Yeah, it's phony and fake. I can't say it enough. Everything that the left seems to be doing, that the mainstream media seems to be doing, is phony and fake. And I have to give it kudos to conservatives. For years, especially since 2020, look at how many viral moments that just regular American conservatives have had, whether it's speaking at their local city council meetings, speaking at their school board meetings, protesting in masses. And the fact that they're able to do this so grassroots and organically, the left is trying to replicate that. But even when they do it, it's very obvious that it's phony and fake.
Oh, you're so right. Actually, you made a perfect segue into our next story, which is another kind of school board adjacent story. And I knew that I had to talk about this story when I knew that I had a mama coming on the show today. So really tragic story out of Illinois. There is a 13-year-old girl who was allegedly forced to change clothes in front of a boy, even though it is potentially against Donald Trump's federal order on boys playing and participating in girls' sports. So this mom, her name is Nicole Gorgas, her daughter came home from middle school upset that a biological boy had been in the girls' bathroom, and the mom was going to the school, I think like any good mom would, she's just trying to get the information, but simultaneously advocating for her child and saying, the school is technically getting federal funds. They shouldn't be allowing a boy in the girls' dressing room. That's in violation of Trump's executive order restricting males and females, or males from female sports and changing rooms. And so the Illinois school came back and said its legal team had advised that the male student use whichever bathroom he pleased, which is kind of crazy that a school district would be more afraid of one individual parent and one individual student versus the federal government and all the girls that go to that school. But this middle school girl and her friends, they decided to protest and then refused to change into their PE clothes when the boy was present. And so the teachers allegedly locked all the girls into the locker room and forced them to change with the boy present or faced consequences. And I just want the audience to know, on top of this, there's a gender-neutral restroom available in the school for the child in question. So as a mom, this story's got to hit different. Like, what do you make of this? And what the heck would you do if this was your child?
Oh, I would be livid. I would have burned the school down, hypothetically speaking. I would have been, oh my gosh, I would have been in that office so fast yelling at those administrators that this is absolutely outrageous. Aside from educating children in, core things like mathematics, literacy, things like that, the school is responsible for keeping your child safe. To put them in a compromising situation that they are very clearly physically uncomfortable with and force them to change in front of a male student is absolutely obscene. And as we talked about earlier, it seems like the left at this point is almost creating more chaos. Look at this student. The student had a gender neutral bathroom option. I think that is more than fair. And for them to still not be satisfied and have to be in front of these women, it also makes you wonder, what is that child's intention? If it is simply okay to identify as a different gender and be able to live their lives, to then infringe on all the students around you when you have an option that is literally just for you, but that's not good enough. It seems like they're starting to create chaos. And when I saw that school board meeting, I lost my mind. I don't know if you saw the clip of the one parent advocating for the trans child over all the other girls involved. She tried to make it seem like it is a small niche religious group of women that are leading the charge. It's like, no, these are just concerned mothers that want their daughters kept safe. I mean, it's absolutely insane. And it almost seemed, like I mentioned earlier, like this mother that was advocating for the trans child was looking for their viral school board moment. They went up there very impassioned, waiting for their little clip that they can post on social media, when they actually said nothing of substance. They basically said that you guys have to accept this and let the student do whatever they want, even if it infringes on your child's safety or comfort. And that's it. There was no substantial reasoning for it. There was nothing. They're basically at the point where they're like, you guys are giving us what we want. We have neutral options, and that's still not good enough. We are going to continue to create chaos.
I know. That's always the thing that kind of throws me for a loop, is that the students that claim they just want to fit in while simultaneously taking on an identity that is so never going to let them fit in. And then they want to just blend. So if you blend, you would naturally just want to do the thing that makes you be seen the least. And that does not mean going into the girls' dressing room as a boy. That's going to intensify that dysphoria that you feel when you look around and you see girls as girls. If you were actually suffering from dysphoria, or a parent was trying to protect their child from dysphoria, you would advocate that they use that gender-neutral restroom or gender-neutral changing area. To your point about these transgender advocates and parents or whatnot, I do have an article up from the National Review saying that the individual in question was named Charlie Friedman, a transgender person and parent of a transgender middle schooler. So interesting.
Not a social contagion, though, right?
Yeah, no, never a contagion. What this person said was, the discomfort or privacy concern of other students, teachers, or parents are not valid reasons to deny or limit the full and equal use of those facilities based on a student's gender-related identity. Instead, any student, teacher, or other individual seeking more privacy shouldn't have to seek more privacy, should be accommodated by providing that individual with a more private option. Why is everybody else gotta go ahead?
The private option they were offered. That's the craziest part about it. It's like, so your solution for everyone else is the exact solution that was given to you.
Yeah, no, exactly. Yeah. So I want to talk a little bit more about that that school board meeting, though. So the mom, Nicole, this is the mom of the daughter who was speaking out about this. She was literally called a bully by activists for advocating for her daughter. So I just think that's so mean in and of itself, to call somebody a bully, which is a strong word, for standing up for their daughter. And then she was booed at this local school board meeting for explaining what happened to these girls. How do you navigate this? We have a lot of parents in this audience. How do you navigate being a good mom while standing up for your children and not putting a target on your kids?
Yeah, it's really complicated, and I hate to say that this is a problem I don't think most of us even knew about when we were growing up and going to school. I can't think of a
No.
single example where a parent had to advocate for their child and it caused tension with the school board, and, it's such a different time that we're living in, and the
Actually,
fact that
wait, I will give you an example.
yeah.
So, my senior year of high school, Occupy Wall Street was really big, and I grew up in the suburbs of Chicago. And so they had Occupy Wall Street come in, and my mom called up the school and said, my daughter's welcome to go to the Occupy Wall Street. Like, they had people on stage that we could learn from. And she goes, if you're not going to provide the other side, then my daughter will go, but she will be asking questions the entire time. She gave me the sheet of questions, and it put me in the worst, most compromising position where now my teachers knew that my mom was an open conservative and advocating for conservative policies, and they hated me after that. So I think that's why I like this question, because it puts your kid in a compromising position when you're trying to do the right thing. And it's just like, how do you balance that?
The best advice I can give to wannabe moms or soon-to-be moms is you cannot care what other people think. You have mother's intuition for a reason. You have the values that you hold dear to yourself for a reason. You really have to stand by those. And quite frankly, the more kids I have, the less F's I give, for lack of a better term, because you get more confident too, especially over time. You experience so much as a mother from the very beginning, from the time of even being pregnant, that you realize the responsibility of these children. And you also look at the world around you, and it's so chaotic that you really have to make very difficult choices now that you may not have had to make 10, 15, 20 years ago if you're parenting. But yeah, you just cannot care what other people think. You really have to stick to your values. And in these moments, even though it's very challenging because you're going to be villainized, whether it's by other parents, by administrators, your child may feel a bit isolated, you will end up meeting so many parents that agree with you, whether they are outspoken about it or
Mm.
quietly. And those really truly become your people. I'm from Southern California. Most of my friends are liberal. It kind of shocks people. Most of my friends are liberal because I was born and raised in Southern California. And quite
Totally.
frankly, none of them really cared about politics until 2020. And even then, most of them have been able to put them aside the same way I put my politics aside, because we have a long-standing friendship and we value and respect each other for many other reasons aside from our politics. But you start to, as you get older and have kids, you do really start to bond with people that your values align with, especially other parents that align, because it's more communal. Those are the people you actually go to for advice because you know that your values aligned. So honestly, I tell people, you cannot care what other people think. And there is a village out there waiting for you. You may just not have found them yet. And sometimes it takes these tough situations to really find them. I can guarantee the moms that are standing up for their daughters are going to be forever bonded for life through this experience.
Oh, absolutely. I can only imagine how I think Riley Gaines has openly talked about how the fight that she is on to, protect women's sports has brought her closer, I believe, to her younger sister, who's a gymnast, I want to say. And they've really bonded over this as well because she feels like she's fighting for someone and advocating for someone other than herself who's, since left the sports space for the most part. So I can only imagine that if that you feel that in a family, like in a sister way, that you would feel that even more with more prowess for your child. But yeah, thank you for that advice because, I would love to be a mama in the near future. And this is something I think about all the time is these situations we never had to navigate 10, 15 years ago when I was in high school, college, middle school, all the things. It's just a different world now that you have to be so on your toes about all the time.
Yeah, and I hate to say it, like, this is not, we see these news stories pop up, but it's a lot more common than what actually makes the news. I
Hmm.
have a little cousin and a niece who are both 13 in Southern California in two different school districts, and they're dealing with a lot of this. The gender identity, it has spread rapidly. Even in one of those districts that used to be fairly conservative, it's completely, become liberal, where now it's based off identity. They have gender neutral bathrooms, but they still have the same issues where students don't want to be in the gender neutral bathrooms. They want to be with the opposite sex. And it's just going to continue to spread until more parents step up and say something about it. This is far more common than people realize.
Yeah, until common sense prevails, we have to hold steady to common sense because to your point about having liberal friends, I've always said that most liberals, your average liberal, does not believe in gender ideology. They think it's actually cuckoo nuts, but they have this morality, this faux morality of wanting to be nice that they think speaking truth isn't nice or it hurts people's feelings, but they don't necessarily believe it. And so it's just, if you call people out enough, if you do the hard work and the groundwork, even the liberals will come to our side. But speaking of insidious ideologies, I do want to get to our next story, which is kind of about Mahmoud Khalil, which I don't know if you guys are familiar with. If you listen to the show, hopefully you're familiar with this. He is the Columbia student and Syrian native who was in or is currently in ICE detention for allegedly engaging in the promotion of terrorism at Columbia University. Okay, so we know about Mahmoud, but we've now got a second student who was also arrested by ICE. Her name is, I'm not even going to try this, guys, Leqaa. Lekwa? I don't know. I'm not going to try it. I'm going to get canceled. Last name is Cordia. I can pronounce that. And Cordia is a Palestinian from the West Bank and a former Columbia student, and was arrested by ICE for allegedly overstaying her student visa. She was among those that were arrested for participating in the April pro-Palestinian protests at Columbia. Now, I'm not going to lie. I am personally kind of shocked that this is even a story, because I'm shocked we let Palestinians into our U.S. education system. Maybe that's like really mean to say, but that shocked me in and of itself. But let me start with this, Sabrina. Where do you lie on the whole Mahmoud Khalil thing? Do you think his ICE detention infringes on his free speech, as many on the left and conservatives have advocated for, argued for, or no, you think he deserves to be detained and deported?
To be honest, I don't know as much about this on the surface level. I believe the First Amendment is meant to protect American citizens. So to be honest, I put a lot of responsibility on these students that are here on either visas. One of them, the second that I'm not going to try to butcher the name
Cordia,
either.
yeah, I don't know.
Cordia, I believe, was on an expired student visa.
Yes.
So if you are here and you are not a citizen, you would think that you would be on your best behavior in order to gain citizenship. But then to be acting out and involved with these organizations when you are here on an expired visa or on a temporary visa, there has to be some responsibility on these students that are not even American citizens. So that's where, if they were American citizens, I would actually argue, the First Amendment, they have a right to protest, they have a right to these things. But when it's someone who is not here even technically legally, it's on them. You put yourself in the situation. You really should have thought this through.
Yeah, I don't think there's anybody advocating for Cordia to be staying here. Obviously, staying on an expired visa, you're out. No one feels bad for you. But where I've always stood on this is that we need to have standards, and they need to be clarified for students coming in, because the First Amendment technically is for everybody that resides in America, not necessarily legal, illegal, anything like that. You reside in America. That is how it's been interpreted. Now, of course, we can go to court over that, and we are going to go to court over that. But technically, it is for everybody. So if the students were under the assumption that they could be terrorist sympathizers and that would be their free speech, then there's part of me that feels sympathetic to that stupidity for them. However, my advocacy for the Trump administration, and correct me if you feel differently, is that what the hell are we allowing terrorist sympathizing students in the first place? Like, we shouldn't be focused necessarily on getting all of these Columbia kids out. Yes, it should be part and parcel of the goal, but we need to be thinking forward. And that means implementing policies that don't allow people from terrorist sympathizing countries to come and get a U.S. education. I feel like people are going to think that's like some fringe radical thing, but like, I don't know a Palestinian that doesn't believe in the eradication of the Jewish state. And if we think that that is domestic terrorism or terrorism that is problematic for our national security and the national security of our allies, then why would we allow them at our universities?
I mean, it's so unusual, and I didn't realize this was a problem until all the DOGE reporting was coming out, and I don't know if you knew, but there was a student who had their college fully paid for here in America that was actually wasn't American, but claimed to be from the Middle East and was able to get their full tuition paid for, and then went and attacked America after graduating.
Yeah, he was an ISIS member.
Yes,
we reported
exactly
on this story. Yep.
Yeah, absolutely
Crazy.
insane. So I'm hoping that with things like the DOGE budget cuts, by not forgiving student loans, especially for people that aren't even American, maybe we'll start kind of minimizing this problem.
Absolutely. If you love this podcast, then you will absolutely love the Underreported Stories Substack. It's an email sent straight to your inbox Monday through Friday. You'll get an in-depth analysis of stories that are underreported, hot takes from me on the biggest news of the day, and Underreported Wrapped, where I'll let you in on personal updates, big news that flew under the radar, and you'll get a few pictures from America's Goodest Boy, my dog, Harper. Check out the link in the description to subscribe for free. And while you're down there, be sure to give this episode a thumbs up or a 5-star review. Okay, so I want to get into our next story, which is about MSNBC. And our next two stories are going to be all about the bloodbath that's happening over at the network. So back in February, we all know MSNBC had this very public shakeup with letting go of Reid, letting go of all of Rachel Maddow's staff, and I think it was approximately 100 other staffers that went. And after these terminations went into effect, very publicly, Rachel Maddow went on her show and just lambasted her own network. And I think all of us were sitting there and kind of like, the audacity of this woman to shit on her own network that pays her millions of dollars to work one night a week. Like, what is she doing? But we now have a little more understanding into why MSNBC staff were so livid. It turns out that MSNBC executives accidentally leaked a confidential document detailing all the layoffs, and it was literally out of a sitcom, Sabrina. Apparently, this exec printed out what was internally called the kill list and left it in the printer, and a production assistant came in, found it, and the PA was like, oh my gosh, all these people are about to get fired, and spread it to the whole company. So I thought that gave us a lot of clarity into the insanity that is happening over at MSNBC. Not that I'm giving Rachel Maddow a pass. I still think that's awful to go on and shit all over your network. But at the same time, it gives me a little bit more understanding that like there was a lot of internal strife. It didn't catch people off guard. It caught people off guard in the most chaotic and scary way possible. But my question for you is, this is clearly like brutal dysfunction happening over at MSNBC. Not that either of us are really in the business of giving advice to left-wing networks, but if you were brought in as the president of MSNBC, how do you rectify and advise this company to get back to being a news network instead of a propaganda machine?
I mean, I am so curious to see what their next steps are, because I believe that the new head of MSNBC is relatively new, which is why she's doing this dramatic shakeup. However, the way that this has been done is completely insane. And also, let's not forget, MSNBC was one of the largest publications and news outlets that was reporting on, Donald Trump's bloodbath comments regarding the auto industry. And it's pretty ironic that they have a quote unquote kill list, that they are calling it a bloodbath over there, after they were just so blatantly disingenuous with how that term was used when Trump used it. But
so true.
It's so backwards. But yeah, I'm curious to see where the direction is, because I mean, it is fairly obvious based off the very low ratings, the record low ratings during an election year. The MSNBC, what they are doing is not working. There needs to be a shakeup. It sounds like they're bringing some more moderates on. They're bringing a lot of never Trumpers, but some Republicans like Michael Steele onto the network. So I'm very curious to see the direction that it goes. But I think the handling of this was completely unprofessional and beyond insensitive to these poor employees that have probably, been there for a while, worked very hard. And yeah, it kind of, the context gives a lot more understanding for why Rachel Maddow was so upset.
You're so right, though, that like we're never supposed to be gleeful about these layoffs, right? Because layoffs happen in conservative media all the time, and I wouldn't be gleeful about that either. It's like, it's still sad when people lose their jobs. So I don't want to be gleeful about the downfall of MSNBC. But I think what we're noticing, and I'd actually love to get your thoughts on Gavin Newsom's podcast too, as a former Californian. He is going into this whole sphere of getting into more combative conversations. CNN is seeing success with Abby Phillips' show and getting into these very combative conversations where they have the Scott Jennings of the world on there to fight with liberals. And it's kind of become a bit of a ratings bonanza to have these Jubilee shows where people are going at it because people believe very different things and they're able to go and be combative. And I think what we saw from MSNBC is they got rid of staff that are just so blatantly partisan to the point where there's not even there's nothing they could possibly do to bring these staff into the fold of the direction of somewhat adversary media where you sit near a Republican. Reid can't sit near a Republican, right? Like, she couldn't do that. And so I think what they're trying to do is not moderate, but get to a point where they can at least have a conversation with a never Trumper. Sorry, guys, I'm still suffering from a sinus infection, so sorry if my voice sounds weird. I feel like I can't breathe right now. But I am curious, though, just because I brought up the podcast, did you listen to Gavin Newsom's podcast at all? Have you heard that at all?
I have seen quite a few clips. I am embarrassed to say that I have listened to his other podcasts because, yes, the governor of California currently has 2 podcasts. People don't realize that. Apparently, he has all this free time amidst catastrophic wildfire damage control and, preparing for his 2028 run. So now he's got 2 podcasts. But yeah, it seems like a lot of these people are realizing that conservatives across the board for many years have always been, or for the most part, been willing to speak to the other side. Even when it is uncomfortable, difficult, they are willing to debate. I would say the strongest debaters out there really come from the conservative side. Look at Charlie Kirk, look at Ben Shapiro. Like, they bring out thousands and thousands of people on college campuses just to hear them debate. I don't know anyone on the left that does that. They had Destiny, who was a hot mess and would not quite do it on the same scale. And so it's interesting to see so many liberals, whether it's Gavin Newsom, you also have MSNBC, as you said, that are trying to bring on more opposing views because they're realizing that that's popular with the American people. They want to hear 2 sides. While we have a lot of conservatives, we have a lot of liberal, there's still a lot of people in the middle that may not know where they stand on a lot of important issues. So the best way for them to learn where they stand is to hear 2 people have a good faith argument about it. So it is pretty smart on Gavin Newsom's part. However, most of us are not, disillusioned by the fact that he is a wolf in sheep's clothing. He is not a moderate liberal who wants to, bridge the gap between the 2 sides by any means. So we're not buying it. He could try all he wants.
His actions speak so much louder than his words do. Real quick before we get into our last story, there are a little bit of breaking news relative to when we're recording this. Dylan Mulvaney just announced his new podcast, all about, he says, the girls, the gays, and the theys. Of the podcasts that we've seen come out, Gavin Newsom, Dylan Mulvaney, and Michelle Obama's absolute flop. Can we rank these? Like, take 2 seconds to rank these. Like, which is the worst?
Oh my gosh.
It's hard.
It is really hard. I think I got to give the worst to Dylan Mulvaney. I mean, the girls and the gays, and now you're attaching these very confused. It's so ironic. Dylan Mulvaney is probably the third for me. Second would be Michelle Obama, which I'm convinced she only put out this podcast to test the waters to see how popular she is still. And based off the ratings, I'm making a prediction that she's going to announce her divorce and talk about it extensively on a podcast episode to get those ratings up. So I think the timing is strategic with all these rumors about the divorce. I think that she is trying to build a little nest egg for herself. They've got like 5 homes that they got to pay mortgages on, and it's going to be a pretty messy divorce, I think. So yeah, and then first I'll give the first to Gavin Newsom. As much as I hate him, I love to watch him so that I could hate him more.
I know, I'm with you on one, but I don't I toggle between, because it's like, okay, Dylan Mulvaney's is obviously just like not so crazy, but like it's not going to be speaking to a wide audience or anything. No one gives a shit what Dylan Mulvaney is doing. But with Michelle Obama, like, it's such a public flop that it's more embarrassing than a podcast for the theys and the gays. Like, something about it is even more wild. And, I'll never understand it. Like, running this podcast is no easy feat, right? Like, it's a difficult industry to break into. It's not that it's difficult when you're Michelle Obama, but it's in general, like, it takes a lot of preparation and time and effort and editing, all of the things that go into it. And no matter how many people you have around you, it is a taxing job to do, to be on top of everything at all times. And I think you hit something really good in that, like, what would make her want to do this other than she's preparing for something and she's in this season of change that would, you just have got my mind percolating with so many things. I can't even articulate them properly. So thank you for that. I really appreciate it.
No, and kudos to you and everyone that's running a podcast. It is so much work and people don't realize it. And that's why I think we see so many celebrities and politicians and, reality TV contestants. Everyone has a podcast because they think it's a way to make a very quick buck. They think they could just roll in and chat quickly for an hour. Oh, I talked to my friends for an hour anyways. Let's just record it. We're so funny on our own. They don't realize the work that goes into it. So look at how many of these podcasts that people have started over the years that flop within a year or two.
Oh, totally. Yeah. I think the success rate is crazy. And also the numbers of people that listen, like, it's so relative to different YouTubes and short. It's just all so different. Anyway, I could glom on and have insider talk about this, but I wanted to get to our last story, which is more MSNBC stuff. So perhaps this could be the downfall for the company. It's dumbass op-ed section. They just released this new article titled "Why Trump's Attack on DEI Are Anti-Christian." I'm just going to read you a little taste of this, guys. It says, Diversity, equity, and inclusion are deeply rooted in Christian teaching. You can't read the Gospels and not come away with a strong sense of God's preference for diversity, equity, inclusion. Lord, please don't strike me down. I'm just reading from this stupidity, okay? Yet another Trump administration living out those ideas will now invite harassment and targeting of Christian and Christian institutions. Okay, I read more of it than just this, and let me just say the premise of the article is that it's anti-Christian to go after DEI because DEI actually helped Christians, when in fact, DEI has the adverse effect on Christianity. It's traditionally, DEI, incredibly biased against the majority of people, like whatever the majority is. The majority of America is Christian. So if we are deemed the oppressive majority, how would DEI help Christianity? I'm so confused by this.
Tell me you haven't read the Bible without telling me you haven't read the Bible. Because you don't have to look far. You can look in 2 Corinthians. You can look all over the Bible to see the importance of treating people equally. It is completely counterintuitive to the DEI initiative, just based off skin color, sexuality, and whatever category they can throw out the wall and hope it sticks. Something I found very fascinating about this article was, you know who they reference for being the epitome driving this force about how Christians need DEI? Is Pastor Jamal Bryant. Are you familiar with Pastor Jamal Bryant?
No, I'm not. It's kind of like newer to my faith journey. My audience knows that. I've been in it for like, I don't know, 3 years. But I'm looking at
no.
Jamal, what's the last name?
Jamal Bryant. So,
okay, let's look
Reverend Jamal Bryant out of Georgia. And the reason I am so passionate about this is it always comes back to Bravo. Yes, Bravo, the trashy reality TV network. So on The Real Housewives of Potomac, one of the stars of that show is Giselle Bryant, who was formerly married to Jamal Bryant. And for people that aren't familiar with reality TV, Jamal Bryant has been in the news a lot over the last year. He hosted Kamala Harris at his mega church. He has a mega church in Atlanta. There has been a lot of sketchiness and a lot of rumors coming out of that church about how those funds are being spent, because it is very suspicious. And on top of it, you know, this is not the prime example of a Christian pastor. The man has cheated on every wife that he has with other women in the congregation, has fathered children with other women in the congregation. There's actually no clear answer on how many children he has. It is pretty wild. So the fact that MSNBC is using this as their credible Christian example of all the hundreds of thousands of pastors in the world is just chef's kiss. And of course, it always comes back to Bravo because, yes, he's been featured on The Real Housewives as well.
Oh my gosh. Now I'm looking at this guy and I just kind of can't get over this, that this is of course, it's somebody that warps Christianity into whatever fits their worldly point of view. I think that's probably one of the hardest things about being a Christian in general in such a hyper-politicized world is that you're forced to take your Christianity and mold it into one of the two political parties. And you hear things like, oh, Jesus treated everyone equally, or, you know, every child was knit in their mother's womb and made. So you're just like divided on what you see and how to put Christianity into a box. And it's like, oh my gosh, guys, if we could just understand that Christianity is not meant to fall into our weirdly created political system, and that we are supposed to adhere to what the Bible says and then vote accordingly to how much of it is in accordance with our Christian values first and foremost, gosh, I think we'd be in such a better place. But you have these people out there, this Jamal Bryant, I'm looking at what in the world? This person has so much power and influence over people, telling people that DEI is pro-Christianity.
Yes, and it gets worse because now that you know who Pastor Jamal Bryant, I can't remember if he's a pastor or Reverend Jamal Bryant is, you're going to start noticing him, pastor, in a lot of viral clips. He just went viral a few weeks ago because the White House celebrated Black History Month. A lot of Black conservatives went and celebrated. I know quite a few personally that went, had an amazing experience, and he was berating them that Sunday at his church service, calling them slaves that were putting themselves back in chains for even visiting Trump's White House. He is as radical as you can possibly get, and disguises behind his pastor label. He's a complete political far left activist disguised as a Christian pastor.
Oh, there's part of me that's like, I love talking about this stuff, and it riles me up. I could just do a whole episode, just you and I talking about all the details of this. But at the same time, I'm like, I don't gotta face the wrath of God like that. Like, you call yourself a pastor, like I I don't even want to,
It's gonna be a rough
even want to.
meeting. Let's just say that. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. All right, before we wrap up today's show, I do want to play a very quick round of our favorite segment here at URS. It's called Is It Real or Is It Satire, where we watch videos or read stories that make us wonder,
is it real or is it satire?
You cannot be serious!
Okay, so this video is just 5 seconds long, but this social justice warrior looking woman, I want to say woman, but not positive, is sitting in the front seat of her car, her, advocating that veterans shouldn't get a 10% discount for being in the military. Let's watch.
I don't like that we give our military guys 10% discount.
I don't like that we give fat people free tickets on airplanes, but you don't see me posting social media videos about it, dummy. I can't. I'm sorry. I'm just floored.
Stuff like this is why the left is losing. People don't realize that any moderate person, most Americans, a vast majority, can agree that when you make the ultimate sacrifice, I mean, I personally know of several people who have served in the military who have lost so many of their friends and people that have fought alongside them. When you are willing to sacrifice everything, the very least we can do is give you a 10% discount at IHOP or wherever you are. I mean, it is so crazy. What a wild hill to stand on,
Oh my gosh. Yeah. Speaking of tying it all back together to our first story, thinking about stupid political capital to waste your time on. Everybody knows that I am like very much of I want to understand where you're coming from, and it helps me to weigh where I fall on things when I can get to the middle and understand both sides. I don't even understand your side on this. They served our country. 10% at IHOP is like the minimum, the bare minimum. And it was so funny to watch people stitch this video. Not funny, but like entertaining to watch veterans stitch this, and they're like trying to clap, but they've lost hands and limbs and stuff, and they're like, I lost more than 10% of my body. I feel like the bare minimum I could get is a 10% discount.
I saw that video. That was the most amazing video. I definitely reposted that on TikTok. I was like, kudos to this guy. Like, that was incredible.
Absolutely. All right, Sabrina, thank you so much for coming on today's show. It's just so much more fun to like yap with somebody, especially somebody who loves pop culture and all the girly things. We should have you back to talk about just Bravo stuff, because I know that's your forte. But if people want to watch the best memes on Instagram, which is, guys, I'm not kidding you, I only know Sabrina because we met very briefly at a party, followed her, and I was like, this girl is like the best account on Instagram right now. Where can people find you?
Thank you so much. That means everything to me because I've loved your content for a while. So when you DM'd me that one day, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm doing something right.
You are. You really are. It's so funny, guys. Her memes are just like, they're for the girls probably a little bit more, but they're just so friggin' funny.
Thank you. You can find me at the Sabrina Kosmas across all social media platforms. I'm probably the most active on Instagram, a bit here on TikTok more, and on Twitter as well.
Awesome. All right, guys, we'll definitely give her a follow. And I want to let you guys know that I'm heading off to South Dakota tonight to be part of this nonprofit launch. I can't give you too much details quite yet, but please be sure to follow me over on Instagram because that's where I'll be posting all about it. So with that being said, I will not have a show on Thursday. No show, but I do have an awesome YouTube video coming out that I spent weeks working on this, and I'm super excited to share it with you. It'll go out at 7 p.m. Eastern, just like the regular show would. Anyway, if you're a real one and you made it to the end of today's show, will you drop the bathtub emoji as an homage to the bloodbath over at MSNBC? I was thinking about putting the blood emoji, but then I was like, I don't know, that felt bad. Anyway, I will see you guys back here on Tuesday. Bye! Thanks so much for watching. If you liked what you heard, please be sure to subscribe and leave a comment about how beautiful, intelligent, and funny I am. And if you want more content, click right over here for more videos and clips of my show. I'll see you back here next time. Bye!